Sirens tore through Jerusalem at 1931 local time tonight. Iranian ballistic missiles crossed into Israeli airspace less than 7 minutes after launch. Most people think this was a limited strike in response to recent escalation. In reality, over 200 projectiles were fired in coordinated waves from 3 launch sites across western Iran, and at least 47 bypassed Israel's Iron Dome entirely. The targets were not symbolic. One missile struck less than 800 meters from the Knesset. Another impacted near Nevatim Air Base, where F-35I squadrons are stationed. Israeli media was ordered to delay reporting for 90 minutes. Satellite feeds over Tel Aviv went dark for 42 minutes during the peak of the barrage. In the next couple of minutes, I will show you what really happened, why the scale of this attack is being downplayed, and what it means for a region that just ran out of off-ramps. Quick, before we continue, thanks a lot for tuning in. Your support is what keeps this show going, and I appreciate you watching. Please make sure you are subscribed and like the video so more people get to see this. Now let us get to it. This strike did not come from nowhere. It came exactly 72 hours after Israeli forces conducted what they called a defensive action against Iranian-backed targets in southern Lebanon. That action killed 6 officers affiliated with Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Tehran publicly warned there would be consequences. Western intelligence dismissed it as routine rhetoric. They were wrong. Iran has now launched 3 major missile operations against Israeli territory since October of last year. The first was in April. It involved over 300 projectiles and was framed as retaliation for a consulate strike in Damascus. The second came in June after an alleged Israeli cyber attack on Iranian nuclear centrifuges at Natanz. Both were absorbed. Both were contained. This one is different. The payload count is higher, the targeting is more precise, and the political window for de-escalation just collapsed. Here is what happened on the ground. Iranian forces launched the attack in 3 distinct waves, beginning at 1924 GMT. The first wave consisted of approximately 70 ballistic missiles fired from sites near Khorramabad and Kermanshah in western Iran. Flight time to Israeli airspace was under 6 minutes. Israeli radar systems detected the launches immediately and activated Arrow 3 and David Sling interceptor batteries across the country. Interception rates during the first wave were high. Roughly 82% of incoming missiles were destroyed before reaching populated areas. But that leaves 18%. And 18% of 70 missiles is 12 impacts. Those 12 hit. One struck an empty schoolyard in Rishon LeZion. Another detonated in an industrial zone south of Haifa. A third landed in open desert near Dimona. No casualties were reported in the first wave. But the second wave changed that. The second wave launched 11 minutes later. This time the missiles came from a different angle. Launch sites near Hamadan sent another 80 projectiles on a trajectory that forced Israeli interceptors to engage from a less optimal position. Interception success dropped to 74%. 21 missiles reached the ground. 4 of those struck within municipal boundaries. 1 hit a residential building in Ashdod. The structure partially collapsed. Emergency services reported 6 civilians trapped in the rubble. 3 were extracted alive. 2 were confirmed dead at the scene. The 6th remains missing. Israeli authorities have not released names. Footage from the scene shows a 5-story apartment block with the southern facade sheared off. Smoke was visible for over an hour. Ambulances were still arriving 90 minutes after impact. The third wave was the most concerning. It launched 18 minutes after the second and involved fewer missiles but higher precision. Approximately 50 projectiles were fired, and this time they were aimed at strategic infrastructure. Nevatim Air Base took at least 2 direct hits. 1 missile struck a taxiway. Another impacted near a hardened aircraft shelter on the southern perimeter. The Israeli Defense Forces have not confirmed whether any aircraft were damaged. Satellite imagery taken 4 hours after the attack shows fresh craters consistent with ballistic missile impacts. Analysts from the Institute for Strategic Studies in London reviewed the footage and stated that the targeting accuracy represents a significant upgrade in Iranian guidance systems. You need to understand what that means. It means Iran is no longer launching projectiles and hoping they land somewhere useful. It means they are aiming. And they are hitting. The missiles used in tonight's attack were identified as EMAD-1 and Ghadr variants. Both are liquid-fueled, medium-range ballistic missiles with a range exceeding 1,700 kilometers. The EMAD-1 is particularly notable because it carries a separating warhead designed to evade interception during terminal descent. Israeli interceptors are optimized to destroy missiles during mid-course flight, but if the warhead separates and maneuvers independently during the final 30 seconds, the probability of successful interception drops significantly. That is exactly what happened tonight. Multiple witnesses in Tel Aviv reported seeing streaks of light split into 2 or 3 separate trajectories just before impact. That is not malfunction. That is design. Intelligence sources speaking on condition of anonymity told Reuters that Iranian missile units had been conducting live fire drills every 6 weeks since February. Those drills were not publicized. Satellite monitoring from commercial providers like Planet Labs captured images of mobile launcher convoys moving into pre-surveyed firing positions near the Iraqi border as recently as last Thursday. Western agencies knew something was coming. They did not know when, and they did not know the scale. One U.S. defense official stated off the record that the coordination required to launch 200 missiles in under 20 minutes reflects months of preparation and operational readiness far beyond what Iran demonstrated in previous operations. Stay with me because this is where the narrative starts to fracture. Iran has fired ballistic missiles at Israel before, but not like this. The April strike was large in numbers, but ineffective in results. Most projectiles were intercepted or missed their targets entirely. Tehran framed it as a symbolic response meant to satisfy domestic audiences without triggering full-scale war. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called it a failure and promised no retaliation beyond existing operations. The June strike was smaller and more targeted, but still lacked the precision seen tonight. That operation hit open fields and caused minimal damage. Western analysts concluded that Iran's missile program was advancing slowly and posed a manageable threat. Tonight proves that assessment was outdated. The missiles launched in this attack were faster, more accurate, and harder to intercept than anything Iran has fielded before. And here's the contradiction nobody wants to address. If Iran can do this now, what were they holding back before? And why are they no longer holding back? 2 children were in that building in Ashdod, a 7-year-old girl and her 9-year-old brother. Their mother posted on social media 4 hours after the strike, asking anyone with information to contact her. She included a photo of them taken earlier that afternoon. The boy is wearing a blue soccer jersey. The girl is holding a stuffed rabbit. Emergency responders found the boy in a stairwell. He survived with a fractured arm and smoke inhalation. The girl was pulled from the rubble 6 hours later. She did not survive. Her name has not been released. Israeli hospitals are treating 34 wounded civilians as of this hour. 12 are in critical condition. That is not a statistic from a war zone. That is a child who will not go to school tomorrow because a government 1,500 kilometers away decided tonight was the night to send a message. And the message landed in her bedroom. Here is where this stops being a regional issue and becomes a global crisis. The United States confirmed within 90 minutes of the attack that it had no advance warning. Secretary of State Antony Blinken released a statement condemning the strike and reaffirming support for Israeli security. But support means weapons, intelligence, and diplomatic cover. It does not mean troops. President Biden has repeatedly stated that the U.S. will not engage in direct military confrontation with Iran. That red line just became significantly harder to maintain. If Israel retaliates and strikes Iranian missile production facilities or Revolutionary Guard command centers inside Iran, Tehran has already stated it will consider that an act of war, requiring a proportional response. Proportional in this context does not mean another missile strike. It means strikes on U.S. bases in Iraq, Syria, and possibly the Persian Gulf. That pulls American forces into direct combat, whether Washington wants it or not. Saudi Arabia issued a statement 3 hours ago calling for restraint on all sides. That is diplomatic code for panic. The Saudis have spent the last 2 years quietly normalizing relations with Israel in exchange for security guarantees and economic partnerships. A full-scale war between Israel and Iran puts that entire framework at risk. If Iranian missiles start hitting Saudi oil infrastructure the way they hit Nevatim Air Base tonight, global energy markets will not absorb the shock calmly. Brent crude futures jumped $4 per barrel in after-hours trading within 2 hours of the attack. Analysts are already forecasting $10 per barrel increases if this escalates further. And here's what nobody in Washington or Brussels wants to admit. They have no leverage left. Sanctions did not stop this. Diplomatic pressure did not stop this. Intelligence sharing did not stop this. Iran just demonstrated they can launch coordinated precision strikes deep into Israeli territory with minimal warning and partial success. That changes the entire strategic calculation in the region. And it does so at exactly the moment when Western attention and resources are stretched between Ukraine, Taiwan, and domestic crises. Most people think this ends with a ceasefire brokered by intermediaries and enforced through international pressure. In reality, this ends when one side runs out of missiles, or when one side loses the political will to keep firing. Right now, neither side is close to either condition. Israel has the military capacity to retaliate on a scale that would devastate Iranian infrastructure. Iran has the missile inventory to sustain attacks like tonight's for weeks. What they do not have is an exit strategy, and that is the single most dangerous fact in this entire situation. Wars end when someone decides the cost of continuing exceeds the cost of stopping. Neither government has reached that conclusion yet. Netanyahu faces a coalition that will collapse if he is seen as weak. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, faces a domestic population that expects retaliation every time Israel acts. Both are locked in, both are escalating, and both are running out of ways to de-escalate without losing face. You need to understand what happens next. Israel will respond. That response will be measured but significant. It will target Iranian assets in Syria, Lebanon, or Iraq. Iran will interpret that as escalation and respond again. Each cycle makes the next one harder to stop. That is not a war with an exit strategy. That is a war running on momentum. And momentum does not negotiate. Thanks a lot for watching. I really appreciate your support. Join the discussion in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts. Do you think Israel's retaliation will be limited, or will this spiral into a broader regional war? And do you believe international pressure can still contain this, or is that window closed? Let me know. Please subscribe and like the video if you want to stay updated, and click the video on the screen to see another. I will see you soon.